Good morning, Cardiff, and welcome and all. And I want to talk about today something quite different to what I normally like to talk about. Today, I want to talk to you about why serverless is more FinDev than DevOps, and we'll see what that actually means soon. So as Matt mentioned, my name is Yan. I'm a principal engineer at The Zone. I also started to recently become an independent consultant as in part-time as well. So The Zone is a sports streaming platform. We like to call ourselves Netflix for sports because we have a very similar business model, and we even stole the UI from them as well. It's not even subtle there. We have something like 40 different sports and over 300 different leagues all around the world, and we are available right now in 7 different countries and over 30 different platforms. And at peak, we see around 1 million concurrent users on our platform, which, as you can imagine, has some really interesting and challenging technical problems. And today, we are using both serverless and containers very heavily in order to tackle those technical challenges. We have offices in London, Amsterdam, Poland, and Leeds, and we are pretty much hiring all of them as well. So if you're interested in what we're doing as a team and also what position we have open, then please go to engineering.thezone.com to check us out. So on a personal note, I have been running production workloads in AWS since about 2009, and as of last year, AWS also made me one of their community heroes, I guess presumably because I travel so much, that focuses on serverless. And I also produced a video course for Manning as well on how to get production ready with your serverless architecture. And Manning has been very kind to offer a discount code to everyone here to get 40% off everything at manning.com. Don't worry about taking a screenshot right now. I'll leave it at the end of the talk. So I want to start with what do we actually mean when we say serverless? And ever since it became a thing when Amazon announced the AWS Lambda in 2014, I've been able to play this game where every time I say serverless, somebody reminds me that there's still a server somewhere, which of course is just missing the point entirely. And I think Goiko says it best when he says that serverless is serverless in the same way that Wi-Fi is wireless. There are still cables running around connecting those routers, but when you're connecting to Wi-Fi, you don't think about the cables, right? They're not your problem anymore. So in the same way, we think about serverless as any technology where you don't pay for it when no one's using it, and that you don't have to worry about scaling and provisioning and managing servers yourself. You might have also heard a very related term, function as a service, or FaaS, and that's where you can find things like AWS Lambda, Azure Functions, Google Cloud Functions, and so on, where you're literally writing a very simple piece of code, a function, you upload it to the cloud, and then you delegate it to your cloud provider to call your function when some event happens. It could be a customer hitting a HTTP endpoint that you have set up, or maybe a message was received on some IoT hub you have set up as well. So compared to other as-a-service things we have in terms of infrastructure, container, platform as a service, function as a service is very close to platform as a service. The main difference I see being that your unit of scaling and deployment is now the individual functions that makes up your application as opposed to deploying and scaling the application as a unit. So by our definition, function as services have got much overlap with serverless, but they're not exactly the same thing. You can also have other services such as S3 for storage, which should also be considered as serverless by our definition. Same goes to DynamoDB or other BI services such as Athena or Google BigQuery. In the same token, if you are a functional service, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're serverless as well. When I look at things like Kubernetes and Knative, which allows you to run fast on your own Kubernetes cluster, to me, they're not really serverless in that the Kubernetes cluster is still my responsibility, and I still have to pay for the cluster, even when no one is running any functions on it. But that said, having the label of being serverless is not important. Things like Knative and Kubernetes, they are very, very much use cases on their own. They have got their own benefits. But I think it's important when we'll be clear what we mean when we say serverless. Otherwise, every time we have a conversation about serverless, we have to be very specific about, do you pay for it when no one's using it? And the thought leaders like Simon Wardley believes that serverless will fundamentally change how we build businesses around technology and how we code. But why are so many of us so excited about serverless? Why so many of you are here today? I think one of the good reasons is that with serverless, you get a lot of scalability out of the box. I no longer have to wait for EC2 instances to spawn and wait 5 minutes before something can happen. And when I need to scale up, I can also tap into this massive pool of managed EC2 instances that Amazon is paying and also managing on my behalf. And when my service doesn't have any traffic, it can also scale to 0 as well. So I don't have to pay for idle service anymore, which in turn means that unless I'm dealing with an application with consistently high throughput all the time, then it's very likely that I will find that I can run my workload a lot cheaper on Lambda, because again, I don't have to pay for it when it's not running. Also, out of the box, you get a very good baseline resilience out of the box, because Lambda by default is deployed to 3 availability zones. Again, I don't have to pay for that redundancy when I'm not using it, but it's there for me to tap into when I do need it. And also, I can allow my cloud provider to take care of more of my security in terms of the security of my operating system, the networking, and they can do a much better job than I can, or at least most of us can. And also that means my application becomes more secure with very little cost to me. So as far as DevOps is concerned, you can see that you get a lot of things out of the box. And it's easy to see why we put so much emphasis and focus around automation and ops when it comes to talking about serverless. And that might be why I was attracted to serverless in the first place. But the thing that made me stay and the reason that I really embraced in the end was more about all these things I used to have between having an idea to being to see the idea running in production, things like setting up load balancers, setting up auto scaling, capacity planning, and this figuring out how to do deployment and so on. When it comes to serverless, a lot of them just becomes irrelevant or have been drastically simplified. So in return, I have this super highway between having an idea to be able to test it against the market very, very quickly. And I get that super highway because I can minimize the amount of things that I have to do that are not important to me meeting my customers' needs. Things like managing servers, setting up a new machine image, and configuring auto-scaling, and so on. And the less things that I have to manage myself means the less operational overhead on me and my team, and more time for us to focus on delivering the things that are important to our customers. And behind all that improvement on automation and DevOps, I think there's something even more profound, something that probably takes a little while for you to really appreciate, unless, of course, you are Simon Wardley, in which case you will have seen it from miles away. You'll be writing about it in 2016 before people even know what it is that you're trying to talk about. And you'll have a paragraph in there saying something along the lines of, we're going to have these new business models around the idea of worth-based development, where finance and development intersects, and what he calls FinDev. And beyond the initial investment in coding, I can create an almost variable cost business model and redirect investment to maximize returns in ways that most of you have never experienced. And I love the fact that he ended the paragraph with, I know, I've been there. This man is so cool. So let's focus on 2 of the things he mentioned here, investment and return. And I think at its core, we all know how to maximize return on investment, right? You buy low, you sell high. It's not exactly rocket science. But what we struggle with, or at least what I struggle with, is understanding all the different forms that return can come back, it can be repaid in. Because it's not always going to be in terms of money, in terms of dollars or pounds. In politics, it could be influence, it could be soft power. In product development, it could be time to market. And as software developers, our investment may be repaid in something that's even more abstract, something like cognitive burden. For example, when we are refactoring a piece of code, we are investing energy and time in hopes with a return as being able to reduce the cognitive overhead required for maintaining a piece of code going forward. And principles such as Yagni or you ain't gonna need it tells us that don't invest in building things when you have no idea what the potential return for your investment is going to be. Same goes to wisdom such as premature optimization is the root of all evil. And as software engineers, we understand these returns better than most. But what about when it comes to return on investment for a business? Well, that's the revenue, that's your return. And I think that's something that's relatively easy to measure. At least we have gotten really good at measuring and predicting revenue. But what about our investment? Well, if you're running on the cloud, then you have your monthly AWS bill. Again, it's very easy to measure. You know exactly how much you're spending on each of the services. But you need to have engineers to build your cloud hosted solution in the first place, right? And engineers over the years have gotten more and more expensive, which is great news because most of us here are engineers. We get paid more every year. But as a company, it means it's now going to cost you more and more every year to bring in the expertise you need to build the things you want. Especially when you factor in those highly sought after skills such as AWS and DevOps. In London, at least, I have been involved with the recruitment process for so long that I know so well that we struggle to find good DevOps engineers with the relevant skills in AWS, with Docker, with containers, with serverless, for anything less than £600 a day. So engineers are super essential to your business, especially if your business centers around technology, but they're very hard to find, and they're expensive to bring in, expensive to retain as well. So you manage to hire all these engineers, you still need to get them a place to work, and to attract the best engineers who let's be honest, they have no shortage of offers. You need to have real estate in locations that are easy to commute to. I've seen more than a dozen researches that all shows that commute is amongst the top 3 things that engineers use to decide whether or not to take a job. And of course, real estate is not expensive, especially in London. They are so expensive. And now that you've got your engineers, you've got to give them equipment, you've got to have to pay for office supplies and fruit baskets and whatnot. But compared to all those, everything else, those sort of tooling costs, they are trivial and they can be amortized easily. But what you do need when you have loads of engineers is to give them a support structure. And to do that, you need to have good managers. And good managers are just as hard to find as engineers, if not more. And like good engineers, they're also expensive and they're also hard to retain as well. But recruitment is probably one of the most important things to you as a company because the culture of a company, the identity of a company lives and dies by the people that walk through the door. And it's absolutely crucial for everybody in the company to be involved in that process to make sure that the right people come through the door, the right people join your team. But having been involved in the recruitment process for more than 10 years now, I also deeply understand just how significant an investment it can be. Not only in terms of the time it takes away from your managers, from your engineers, from building the things that you actually want to build and ship to your customers, but also just in terms of the amount of money involved as well. Agencies, pretty much everyone uses agencies, and finders fees, the industry average is around 20% of the new joiners' salary for the first year. And those numbers can add up very quickly. And the irony here is that I think when we try to understand our total cost of ownership for our application, as a business, I care about opportunity cost. I care about time to market. But when I look at my investment, the thing that I can see easily, the thing I can measure easily is my operational cost. It's what I see at the end of the month on my AWS bill. And it's a well-reserved phenomenon that what gets measured gets optimized. So we often find ourselves in a position that we're trying to optimize for the wrong things. All the while, most of my budget is being spent on hiring engineers and hiring managers and paying for the offices that everyone works in. And earlier, when I said that serverless can be cheaper on your AWS bill, it's true, it's factual. But I also find that it's often a distraction that stops you from thinking about the true cost savings from serverless. And just before Christmas last year, the Register published this article, which has got this clickbait title, and naturally, I took the bait, I clicked on it to see what's going on. And in the article, they referenced a white paper by a couple of boffins, as they call it, from UC Berkeley, where they used Lambda to run 2 types of workloads to train a machine learning model and to do low latency prediction serving via batching. And if you've done anything with Lambda in production and knows how it works, you probably see straight away that these are not workloads that are a good fit for the paradigm, for the product, for the Lambda service. So understandably, the guys found it to be much more expensive to run those workloads on Lambda, and they came to the conclusion that servlet, or AWS Lambda in this particular case, is super expensive or has inflated costs. But many of you are probably sitting here and thinking, well, that's just not representative at all of what us, as an industry, do most of the time. Me and my peers are building REST or GraphQL web endpoints or building data processing pipelines and ETL processes. How does what they found relate to us? And also, it doesn't match up with what other people are saying. Other people whose workload look a lot like mine. And I have actually done some collaboration work with Goiko as well as Robert from the Imperial College on a white paper a while back on our experiences with running serverless in production. And we both found huge savings when we moved from EC2 to Lambda. So it makes me question that if you try to draw conclusions about the general cost effect that serverless has, and you're only using workloads that are clearly a bad fit for the paradigm, should you even be surprised that your workload ended up to be more expensive? And it certainly cannot be taken as an indicator that serverless is just inherently more expensive anyway. And as earlier I mentioned that most of our budget is spent on people, on engineers and on managers. So surely the most effective way or the most effective saving you can make and to get the best return on investment is to give your engineers more leverage so that they can do more with less. And maybe you also find that you don't need as many engineers to get stuff done. And having fewer people means lower organizational communication overhead, and less engineers means less support structure you need to have. The more engineers you have, the more engineering managers you're going to need to hire as well. And that leverage comes from all the things that your engineers don't have to do themselves anymore. And that leverage comes from all the things the platform does for you, often better and cheaper than most of us can manage ourselves anyway. And even at the end of the day, your Lambda bill is just as much as EC2, maybe even slightly more. You're still going to be making additional returns in terms of the productivity and time to market you're going to get as a business. I know, because I've been there. I've been personally responsible for migrating a social network startup I worked at before to run pretty much entirely on serverless. We didn't do it to save cost, but we did it to make the system more scalable and more resilient and to be able to move faster as a business. So that whole journey took about 6 months, and at peak we had about 6 developers, and we didn't just sit there and do migration all day long. We also developed tons of new features. In fact, that was the driving force behind us moving to serverless, is so that we can build features faster, we can ship things quicker. And the cost saving is just a nice side effect in this case. And the most important, the metric for me was that we went from doing 4 to 6 production deployments, every deployment taking 30 minutes downtime a month, to doing 80 to 100 easily with no downtime. And we did that without having to scale up the team, without having to hire another 10 engineers to go faster. And we went from taking weeks to implement a new feature to sometimes getting the feature implemented and shipped to production in the same day. And when the product teams can have confidence that you can deliver things quickly, collaboration also improves as well. They're more inclined to do the right thing from the start, rather than coming to the development team with all these workarounds and compromises from day one, because they are concerned about how quickly we can actually deliver the thing they want at the end of the day. And when things move quickly, everybody is happier as well. So I digress. Let's go back to the topic of how does finance and development can combine to great effect. And the question that most product owners would love to be able to answer but struggle to do is, what is the return on investment for the business on this particular feature? To understand and work out that return on investment, we need to know the investment in terms of how much time is it going to take and how many engineers I'm going to put on this project, but also importantly, how much is it going to cost us to run this feature going forwards. And in the serverless world where you're paying for uptime, whether you're handling 1 transaction per second or 1,000 transactions per second per server, you're still paying the same amount for that server per hour. So your actual cost per transaction is highly variable. It's tied to the usage, which is something that's completely outside of your control. And when you try to estimate your cost per transaction, it's going to follow a graph like this, where you're going to get a massive spike every time you have to add a new server to your cluster. And when you have multiple services or features all grow through the same server, and it doesn't have to be, and we don't have to be talking about a monolithic system here. Even within microservices, many of your microservices are shared and are used to support different features. How do you then attribute the cost for individual features based on the usage and whatever you pay for that particular server? And how do you cater for the fact that having multiple requests happening concurrently on the same server is going to have a performance impact on everything that happens at the same time? Understanding the operational cost for individual features becomes super difficult, if not impossible. And earlier I showed you this quote from Donald Roof, where he said that we should forget about small efficiencies, say about 97% of the time, premature optimization is the root of all evil. It's a very famous quote, but it's only half the quote, and probably the only half you ever see, because every time I see on screen, the speaker only chooses to show you the first half and omit the second half, which I think is just as important and insightful, that yet we should not pass up our opportunities in that critical 3%, meaning we need to profile our application, understand where we're going to get the best return on investment from all the effort we're going to put in to optimize this code. We see this how the same philosophy can apply to serverless in a moment, but let's take a moment to assume that your application is not so sluggish that you are forced to have to optimize everything for performance reasons. And that the outcome we're after here, or we're hoping for, is to be able to reduce our operational cost. And when the goal of the optimization is around cost, they need to take into account that your input, your investment, the engineering time you're going to put in is also expensive as well, because as we talked about earlier, engineers are expensive. And I just so happened to have a conversation on Twitter the other day where Cameron mentioned he had this meeting with about 8 developers for an hour about how they can save about $10 from the Lambda bill. And when you crunch the maths, by conservative estimate of, say, $50 per hour per developer, that conversation alone with 8 developers is going to cost them $400. And with a potential saving of $10 per month, you're looking at a break even for the conversation to take 40 months. And statistically, most startups would have died before that. So your chance of getting that return on investment before you even do any work is close to 0. So as Donald said, 97% of the time, these optimizations are just not worth even talking about, because talking about it takes time, takes money. But then again, given how difficult it is to estimate the actual cost for individual features, how do we even begin to identify where is that critical 3%? And that's where the pay-per-use pricing model comes in, where it gives me this 20/20 vision on how much every single layer costs. It's not just the Lambda functions, but given a user transaction, I can estimate with a high degree of accuracy and confidence how much each of the layers is going to cost me. The API gateway request, the Lambda invocation, the operation against DynamoDB, and so on. And since this is a question that many people are asking, we also start to see tools that start to support them. Lumigo, for example, they've got a booth outside. Go talk to those guys. They can show you, they can track and report the cost for you at the transaction level. So in this case, I can quickly see how much the average user transaction for signing in is going to cost me, what about the payment processing, and what about generating reports. So as a business, I can understand what is the cost for running these features. And when I look at them side by side with the revenue those features are generating, I can actually understand what is my return on investment for those features. Are they worth pursuing further? What should I be optimizing instead? So I hope this gives you a sense of what do we mean when we talk about worth-based development, using this ability to understand the cost distribution to work out where best to apply our optimization efforts. And optimization is not just about performance anymore, it's also about cost as well. But there's more. You can actually leverage this pay-per-use pricing model the platform gives you and use it as a competitive advantage yourself. As I transition to the world of consulting, one of the first questions I've had to answer is, how do I price myself? What do I charge my customers? And it's the same question that most businesses have to ask themselves as well. And that becomes a key part of their business model, which is basically how do you plan to generate sustainable revenue and become successful in the long term. And as consumers, I think we should always try to understand the business models for the products that we depend on, that we use every day, because that's how we really understand whether or not we can have a mutually beneficial relationship with these businesses. And as the saying goes, if you're not paying for the product, you are probably the product, and that's the case with most social networks that we use every day. But let's look at something that we are hopefully familiar with, the gym. Unless you're like me, where you got a gym membership for years and years and only go like maybe 3 times a year, in which case it's probably not a very mutually beneficial relationship there. So for a gym, they would generate revenue through membership signups, but when members come in and actually use the gym, they're going to cause wear and tear, which means the gym have to pay for maintenance and upkeep, and also have to have staffing costs as well. So you can probably derive from that the business model for a gym is to encourage people to sign up, to push them towards the memberships, knowing that most of them are not going to take full advantage of the membership and use the gym regularly anyway, because it's easier to sign up than to actually go and do exercise. But we still want to have the membership because it makes us feel good, because we haven't given up, right? We haven't just given up on our good health. And you can also find similar subscription-based services everywhere in all kinds of industries, and they seem to be particularly popular with streaming services who incurs cost whenever members are streaming content in terms of bandwidth and API calls and infrastructure and so on. And of course, these platforms, they want people to use their service. But then again, they're probably all secretly hoping that not every single member is streaming all the time. Imagine how much it's going to cost Netflix if all of us are streaming Netflix all the time. None of us are working. All we do is watch Netflix 8-9 hours a day. It's going to cost them a fortune, way more than the membership fee we actually pay them. So say 80% of your customers will cost the platform less than what they would pay you on a monthly basis. But if the opposite is true, then as a platform, you got to think about, okay, maybe I need to reevaluate how much I charge for the membership, or maybe I need to put some limits on usage, which is what we see with buffets and with mobile data plans, which is all you can eat buffet, so long you do that within 2 hours and you don't order these things from the menu. And then on the other hand, you also have all these other businesses that are more sort of transactional for services that you don't tend to use every day, all the time, which are more transactional in nature, things like taking a ride with Uber or going to Tesco to buy some stuff. So for these businesses, they depend on usage and putting a margin on everything that you spend, charging a premium on top of what the transaction will actually cost them. So unlike those subscription-based businesses, these guys are incentivized to drive usage instead. So I mentioned earlier that I did a video course with Manning on how to get production ready with serverless. And so as part of that, I also looked around the market to see the different online learning platforms out there and what kind of business model they operate with. And I see the same kind of split between transactional versus subscription-based. And for some reason, I find that subscription-based models are very, very popular with online learning platforms. And I guess, like the gym, we like to have the membership. It makes us feel invested in learning. But the actual time and energy it takes to go and learn something is way more than the monthly fee that we pay them. And making use of this platform is also going to incur costs for the platform themselves. But enterprises also like this model because it is easier for them to work out their budget and to have something they can offer as a thing to their employees. But keep in mind that these platforms also have a different group of customers, the content creators like myself, who does a lot of work, to be honest. But as an instructor, if you're working with a platform that has a transactional model, you typically get a royalty or percentage of the revenue from the sales. And if you're working with a platform that has got a subscription model, then you typically have this revenue share model whereby you get a slice of the platform's revenue based on how much time students spend on your course compared to all the other courses on the whole platform. And in terms of the sort of transactional model, you get the industry standard for royalties about 20%. So as an instructor, you're thinking, well, I'm creating all the content, doing most of the work, but I'm only getting a fraction of the revenue that I generate. So that doesn't sound great. But with the revenue share model, only a few courses that on any platform would make a decent return, again, for your investment in time and energy. So I think that's probably why other platforms like Leanpath, where it allows you to self-publish, are starting to become more popular. But then again, you look at that, okay, 80% is much higher than the normal 20% royalty I get, but now I'm doing all of my own marketing. And what do I really get for 20% of my revenue? Well, there's the bandwidth cost, there's the hosting cost, but those things are cheap nowadays, right? And 20% of my revenue seems quite a lot of money to give away for that. So as a content creator, you seem to just always lose. You don't get to bear the fruits of your labor. But what if someone's got this bright idea to take the pay-per-use platform pricing model and build a platform that gives you 100% of your royalty back, so you keep all the money that you generate, but as a platform, I charge you operational costs. So the cost that I incur in terms of bandwidth, in terms of hosting and so on, but I charge you a premium on my cost. So in this case, essentially, I'm giving you as a platform, I'm giving you as the instructor a pricing model where your cost is tied to usage. And if you price your course so that, like the gym, so long people doesn't come and watch your course repeatedly, say end-to-end 5 or 10, 50 times, then, and you know most students don't even go through the course end-to-end even once. Many people are like myself, we will buy courses on impulse because again, it makes us feel good. We got a course on business studies, but we don't never find the time to actually watch them. I've got a massive bookshelf full of books that I've read, maybe the 10%, and I've got lots of video courses that I bought everywhere, which I don't have the time to watch. And that is much more appealing to me as an instructor compared to the normal royalty model where I lose a huge chunk of my revenue on day one. And as a platform, instead of banking on students buying but not actually watching the courses, I charge a premium on usage in terms of bandwidth and API costs. And bandwidth is likely to be the biggest cost, but still, they are really, really cheap these days. And those are the prices for CloudFront. For the major markets, they're talking about 8 cents per gigabyte. And as the platform scales up, the cost also drops as well, which the platform may decide to keep the money or to pass the saving back to the instructors. In this case, because as a platform, I'm incentivized to encourage usage. So I actually want to encourage the students to get the value for their purchases. So it's good for the students. And as instructors, I'm also being more fair as well, because instructors, you actually get the fruits of your labor. Putting together a video course is hard work. For every hour of content, I've spent easily 10 to 20 hours producing and making it and preparing it. So having this low cost to the instructors also helps to keep the prices low as well. Unlike platforms like Udemy, where pretty much you only ever buy things from there during a sale, and that's where they generate 90% of their revenue. Because as a customer, you are trained to only buy things when it's on a sale because they're running sales all the time. And it's not a sustainable model because basically the platform is telling me that I shouldn't trust you as a platform. Your prices are dishonest. So the only time when I can get a fair price is when I buy it during a sale. So I think we can actually have a more harmonious relationship between the platform, the students, and the instructors. But for any of that to work, you need to have this ability to be able to track and attribute operational costs towards individual courses. And that's where the superpower that Serverless gives you in terms of this 2020 vision on how much every single layer costs you comes in. And that's what Simon Wardley calls the variable cost business, in which case I can build a different business model that's different from, build a business model that's different from the traditional fixed cost model where your costs can be variable based on actual usage. So with that, I think just ran out of time. And thank you guys very much for listening and for spending the time. And enjoy the rest of Serverless Days Cardiff. As I mentioned earlier, here's the discount code for Manning, where you can get 40% off everything for I think the next month or a couple of months. All right, thank you guys very much.